Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Brendan Collins. This is a special TalkSat event that we have for you today. Pleased to be welcoming some folks from the show Natasha, Pierre The Great Comet of 1812. It's a fantastic, incredible musical, unlike anything you've ever seen. So just to quickly intro the four guests, Dave Malloy, he's the writer and composer of the show. Rachel Chavkin is the director. Brittain Ashford plays Sonia, and Josh Groban plays the title character of Pierre. So please join me in welcoming Dave, Rachel, Brittain, and Josh. Welcome. Welcome.
Oh no, I'm gonna blend into the curtain.
Oh, I told you.
Yeah.
Damn blue.
Yeah, Google camouflage. We're working on it. So welcome. Thanks for coming. So just to quickly, I know a bunch of people have seen the show, but for those of you who haven't, the show is an adaptation of a small chunk of War and Peace, which might not strike you as Broadway material right off the bat. But it basically tells the story. It's a complicated, like Robert Altman-esque weaving of a lot of storylines and characters, but it basically tracks Natasha and Pierre and their two lives as they intersect in 19th century aristocrat Russia. But as you saw in the clip, it's a pretty incredible experience. It's a genre-bending kind of whirlwind that never comes up for air. And it's an incredible thing. And one of the best descriptions of it comes from Anthony Tomasini from the New York Times. And forgive me when I flatter you to your faces. But Mr. Malloy especially, the show lifts styles with such abandon, making willful shifts from punk riffs to agitated Broadway ballads, mock pompous recitative to gritty Russian folk songs, or drinking choruses with klezmer clarinets. You eventually lose track of what is being appropriated and you stop caring. So the result is almost like, it's a pastiche, like a Tarantino almost experience. So first question is for Dave. So you're the creator of the show.
Sure.
Thank you. I know you've told the story before, but how did you come up with the idea for a musical based on War and Peace?
It was really just upon reading the novel for the first time that, for whatever reason, this particular section immediately sang out to me. I famously was working on a cruise ship at the time, so I was in a very particular mental space, and I was actually feeling very much a social misfit aboard the ship. I was working on the ship, and it just wasn't really my social scene. So I really related to Pierre, who is this character who is just a profoundly awkward person. I just really related to his sense of like kind of being this kind of lost in this society and like not quite knowing how to act, and really also just super searching and like having Pierre's this deeply philosophical, spiritually lost character. And throughout the entire novel, he's just searching. So when I read this particular when I was reading the novel, I was so relating to Pierre, and then I got to this particular 70-page section, and there was something about the way that Tolstoy wove the two stories of, Pierre's existential crisis, and then Natasha having this like first, romantic disaster of her young life, and the way that these two stories kind of, ran in parallel for a while and then intersected just at the very end, and it really just reminded me of the structure of a classic musical, the kind of two-couple structure of two stories kind of running in parallel that intersect at one point, and I loved how it kind of subverted that in that it wasn't two romantic couples, it was like one romantic couple and one like spiritual couple, one Pierre and God, or Pierre and existence, or Pierre and the rest of the world.
Right, so you take that seed from the whatever cruise ship you're on. How do you get it to the first staging, which was at Ars Nova? Any Ars Nova fans in the house? Woo. Cool, anyways. How do you take that idea and bring it on stage?
The terrifying thing, the thing about the Ars Nova is, so they had seen another show of mine, Beowulf, 1,000 Years of Baggage, which was a rock opera based on Beowulf. And based on the strength of that, they invited me to be their composer in residence one year. And being a composer in residence, you get a commission from them. So they're like, what do you want to do? What's your dream project to do? And so I'd had this War and Peace idea kind of tucked away in the back of my head. And I very sheepishly, like thoroughly expecting to be shot down, offered this idea, like, well, what if we did a musical based on a little bit of War and Peace? And this is like a 90-seat theater, very, very small theater. So I thought they'd be like, why don't we try something that maybe just has two characters, something very small. But much to my surprise and horror, they enthusiastically said yes. And then I was like, oh God, so now I have to write it?
Yeah. Well, it's just amazing how it's evolved over the years. Because when it premiered Ars Nova in 2012, I believe. Yeah. So Rachel, actually, you've also been involved with the show since its inception at Ars Nova, and you've been right there alongside Dave as you've sort of helped it evolve into the amazing thing that it's become. So over the years, like, you know, and the set itself, I don't know, you caught a glimpse of it in the clip, but it looks like if, you know, like Tolstoy had a mansion in Palm Springs, basically. It's this amazing throwback, but it's also a little run down, and it's such a visceral
It is now.
thing.
Yeah, no, we're trying.
Yeah, a lot of wear and
maintain
tear,
it.
but there's some amazing statistics about the actual set. So there's 262 individual light bulbs in 31 chandeliers on the set, and there's 126,000 Swarovski crystals in the costumes.
Yeah.
How do you maintain, but for starting in a 90-person theater, how do you maintain that intimacy as you go to 1,400 seats?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the really wonderful thing about how the show developed and moved to Broadway, because all four of us made our Broadway debuts with this show, as did almost the entirety of our creative team and almost the entirety of our cast. So this is really a show that has come from the pavement to Broadway. And what's been wonderful about that journey is that it grew slowly. So starting with 87 seats, we really figured out in the porous theater sense of the word what was essential and what was the DNA of the show, which very much, there's a huge amount of, there is no fourth wall, and there literally can't be because the set is everywhere. The actors are constantly swirling around the audience and behind the audience, and that was the case even at Ars Nova. And one of the big reasons for that was because when you're reading a novel, you have this incredibly intimate experience. It's a one-on-one experience, and either the character is talking directly to you, or in the case of Tolstoy, that narration is directly to you. So getting that DNA in place at Ars Nova, which forced such intimacy, I mean, we were exploding out that theater space, meant that when the time came to get bigger, it was never a question of what the DNA was. It was never a question as to what we would be enlarging, just how we were going to do it. And so along the way, we went from 10 performers, 10 actors, I should say, and a band of 6 at Ars Nova, just the 10 principals, to adding an ensemble of 6. And then when we transferred to ART, which was slightly over 500 seats, that grew to an ensemble, a full on stage of 24. And then now on Broadway, it's 30 people on stage. And one of the reasons for that is to make sure that we have enough actors to take care of as many audience sections as we have. But all the look of the show has been the same since the beginning. It's red velvet curtains, and Mimi calls it being inside a Fabergé egg, or like a dream of Russia. Mimi Lian, who is our scenic designer, has been obviously a huge partner in this. It's
a really amazing. You kind of just hit it on the head of I was trying to figure out how you translate it as it gets bigger and bigger. And as you mentioned the DNA of the show, that can scale sort of endlessly.
Exactly.
But at the same time, as all of this stuff is happening, you know, you mentioned it's not chaotic, but it's a swirl all the time. But the story itself is really grounded, and it's a pretty universal experience of, first crush, heartache, loss, jealousy, power. How do you keep the story as the focus for the whole time amidst all this other stuff happening?
Yeah, I mean, I love that chaos that you're talking about is definitely like my favorite thing to see on stage. And I can say confidently there are moments in the production now that I still have never seen, that are like tiny moments where, like at one time I was sitting and this was staged. I mean, all of it's staged in some way, but like during the duel scene, which takes place in a modern nightclub setting within that space, 2 people came over and snorted lines off my table. And you're like, oh, wow, I saw that. And the person right next to me probably didn't. But I think in terms of the story being grounded, it goes back to Dave's initial question and response, which is like, it's very pure what the work is doing. These 2 strands, Natasha's rise and downfall and Pierre's spiritual resurrection. And so when you have an environment where everyone knows what story they're telling, that actually allows for a huge amount of individual freedom within the larger structure. And so I think constantly as a cast, we would just check in about what the central story was of a given scene and how all elements of the choreography, which Sam Pinkleton has been a huge partner in, how all elements are driving towards telling the story of Pierre's nightmare party, or almost like Natasha's bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah during the Balaga sequence. So it's just staying grounded in the really simple human action that's at the center of any moment.
So related to watching the show grow into what it's become, Brittain, you've also been involved with the show since its early days. So aside from the venue, what's changed the most?
I mean, it's crazy to me because it's the venue that has changed the most. To me, it's like the story remains the same. To me, the intimacy, despite any reservations I initially had, ultimately is very similar to me. So it's kind of the size and the scope of the audience that we're able to reach. Obviously, our audience itself is different. You know, the type of people who are willing to venture over to 10th Avenue, to Ars Nova, to an 88-seat cabaret theater is different than the average audience goer who might be really excited to come see Josh. It's ultimately a different audience. I mean, there are folks who come to see the show who know very little of Broadway but love Josh's work, so they want to see it, or know very little of Josh's work and just know Broadway shows, so they want to see it. And then there's some people who are just like, I've heard this is a great show, so I want to see it. It's a much wider net than we ever had before, which is very exciting. But the thing that I'm most proud about the show, like from start to where we are now, is maintaining that intimacy, in part because I love the show so much. And I never would have thought at the beginning, you know, when Dave approached me with this idea, I thought, oh, that sounds great. I don't know. Like, oh, that sounds really cool. Really?
Yeah. Did he call you from the cruise ship to pitch you to say? Yeah.
No.
I had
Flair.
Yeah.
I had to ply her with beer to convince her to do it.
This is true. He was like, hey, meet me at this bar. I was like, cool. And he's like, okay, I've got this great idea. And I was like, oh, no, I don't think I'm the person you want for that.
Yeah.
And he was like, here's another beer. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm still not the person you want for this. And he was like, how about one more beer?
How about a whiskey?
That's kind of what I did to Dave to get him to hire me, actually.
I was actually thinking, because I've heard, Josh, in other interviews you mentioned that story of over a drink or five, you hashed out the arrangement to join the show. So, I mean, you're obviously used to performing consistently and regularly, but acting with other people on stage was a new thing.
It was. I hadn't done proper theater since senior year of high school. So I had done concert versions of shows. I had been a part of some really wonderful Broadway-themed musical experiences. But this was something that was altogether new for me and something that was an opportunity for me to get scared again, to really learn a great deal, to be a cog in a really beautiful wheel instead of, you know, spending 15 years in a solo spotlight, to be a part of an ensemble, to be part of a show where everybody has each other's back and is equally responsible for telling this beautiful story every night, was something that was really, really appealing to me. And I always loved this show. I was a fan of it since I saw it in the tent when it was in the meatpacking district. Loved the character, found every character in this show to be very relatable, even in a contemporary environment. And just, I'd read a blurb that they were thinking of bringing this to a proscenium, that they were thinking of transforming a Broadway theater. And I think for those of us that have loved the show for a long time, we all kind of were equally excited and maybe a little skeptical about, is that going to work? But I was so intrigued, and I thought this is a chance to really take a risk here and try something that would be a creative masterclass for me. And so I did. I reached out, and it turned into drinks with Rachel and Dave, and it really was just a creative conversation about what we believed, how we believed in the show, and what we saw in the show, and whether or not it would fit. And then I wound up singing some of the material for Dave at my apartment, and it wound up being a natural fit. I in no way, shape, or form ever wanted to nudge my way into something like this.
Right.
This was a show that was very special for me too as a fan, and so it had to be the right fit. But thankfully, through Dave and Rachel's belief that it could work and our hard work, it paid off.
So, Josh, you and Brittain are separately, your kind of day jobs are singers and performers and musicians in your own right. So
Day job is a stretch because Josh actually gets paid.
but the principle, for the love of the game, right? You moonlight as Broadway stars, is what I'm saying. So do you find it interesting or challenging to go from your onstage persona during the show back to your own music? Has that been interesting?
Yes and no. Honestly, I don't have a ton of time to do my own stuff, but I found I went on a tour over the summer, and it's like, this is actually more my scene. Like when I play a show, this is the kind of room I'm used to playing. So it's nice because I can be like, hey, I like your shirt. Like, oh, Michigan, yeah. I can do that, whereas like you can't do that on Broadway. That's not cool.
But the eye-to-eye connection is probably pretty similar.
Yes, it's very similar.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, I think I was well prepared for that, but I think it might be different for you.
It was. One of the things Rachel really and I had to work on was getting used to that kind of intimacy that I had not been used to, especially on the tour that I had just come off of, where you're looking out at kind of an abyss of people, and it's very easy if you're feeling nervous or feeling whatever to just kind of zone out and look at the mass. And you've got like usually the front row of people who paid a lot and are just kind of over it, and then like and you can't really see like the super fans way out in the back seats. So it was a little jarring, I think, at first, especially singing a show during my concert tour, which was very much in a style that I've been doing for 15 years, and then taking on a role which we knew I'd have to kind of rough up the edges a little bit vocally and emotionally to get into. But in the rehearsals, Rachel really made sure that we had people to look at every time, and to not be afraid to be kept honest by people that were right in front of you at all times. And that was a different experience for me, but it's one that has been rewarding, and one that I will now bother the people in my front row when I do my concerts now, because it's too much fun.
Yeah, related to that, it's interesting, because you can't sit in the front row of the show and just be over it. Like, the show happens around you.
Oh, you still can.
You definitely
You definitely can. Yeah. There is some stink eye during the bows where we're just like, you...
But there is, I mean, granted, that's true, but...
Like, why did you buy that seat? Sir, why did you buy that seat?
My
If you're going
wife
to look at us
bought
that
it.
way
My
all
wife
night.
bought it.
My wife bought it. My wife bought
I
the
hate
seat.
theater.
yeah.
But you also never know who's receiving something. Like,
That's true.
actually,
People-
it's sort of
yeah.
extraordinary how individual. I mean, it's something that Dave has talked about a lot, but how much the setting. It feels like Tolstoy in that, like, one of the reasons the book is so long is because Tolstoy's ambition is to talk about all of Russia, from the low to the high, from the young to the old. And so we have done that by casting 1,200 plus people in our show, which is the audience. And so you get this incredible, like, mixture of humanity. And one of the best things in the world is to watch someone receive Natasha during her aria, during No One Else, and she leans over and is like, "Dear diary, I'm in love for the first time, and I'm looking at the moon." And that's absolutely a one-on-one relationship with a single person who's like with this 19-year-old and in her brain. And that's an incredibly romantic thing, and it's very special to be that person, but it's also equally wonderful to watch that person receive and sort of blossom if they're open to the contact.
You can tell a lot about the person by how they respond to, especially that scene. There's the people that look at Natasha and go, "Been there, yeah." And then there's the people who are just like, "I've never felt love in my life." Be gone, child.
Yeah.
One of the things I really enjoy, and it's kind of an unexpected thing, is when you don't think someone is having a good time, because they are very close to you, and they're sitting there and they're like, you think this is like my personal inner monologue. It's like, they hate this. Why are they here? And then they're the person at the end of the show who's like,
Yeah.
you're like, where did that come from? I did not see that coming.
I actually, my wife is a performer, and whenever I go to her shows, I actually have to sit in the back because apparently I have a terrible audience
You have a
face.
terrible
'Cause I'm
audience
just like,
face.
but I'm just like soaking it all in. Like I'm not making, it's just all happening in my head. And I'm like, and after the show, I'm like, oh my God, it was so amazing. You were like, and she's like, really?
He does this when you have dinner with him too, though.
It's just my thoughtful face.
Yeah.
Resting thoughtful face
Yeah.
is what we call it. Yeah.
RTF. Yeah. So speaking of I love the idea that Tolstoy tried to write a book about everything. Even the title War and Peace. That's half of everything and the other half of everything.
I think it's just everything.
Well, exactly. But the casting for the show, I love that you've talked about this in past interviews where you wanted to have a similarly kind of ecumenical approach to who is the star of the show that is about everything. Mm-hmm. And the characters themselves are kind of ciphers for whoever happens to be experiencing that thing. So can you talk, just to quickly call out some people in the cast, it's incredibly diverse. So Natasha is played by Danae Benton, who's an African-American. Her understudy last week while she was on vacation is South Asian.
And I should say one of two. Danae has two understudies, one of whom is Southeast Asian, who tragically apparently is the first Southeast Asian performer
Since Bombay
in 10
Dreams or
years
something like
since
that? Yeah.
Bombay Dreams
Yeah.
to play a female to play a leading principal role on Broadway. And then her other understudy is a white actress named Lauren Zachrin, who's equally wonderful. Anyway.
Yeah,
Continue.
no, and the new Pierre, this is not a spoiler, is Oak Anauduan, who was from a little show, Hamilton, I think it's called.
I haven't.
Am I pronouncing
Can you
it
get me
correctly?
tickets?
Yeah.
But he's also African American, and so you have the show about 19th century Russia, and if you were your knee-jerk reaction would be to not necessarily cast the people you've cast. So can you walk me through the decision behind to make it what it is?
Sure. I'll.
One thing to start with, I think going back to the idea that Tolstoy was trying to talk about everything that was 19th century Russia at that moment. And so we are taking that story, but now we're telling that story in 21st century New York City. And 21st century America. And so I think one of the amazing things about the staging and what we've been talking about, the intimacy of the staging is everyone is both the character and themselves. We are very much this troupe of actors in New York City doing this story. So we just wanted the casting to reflect, well, what does 21st century America look like? In the same way that Tolstoy's what does 19th century Russia look like? And 21st century America is beautifully diverse. So we wanted a beautifully diverse cast. Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you. Just to quickly go back to the audience participation element to the show, aside from the now legendary phone throwing incident of 2013, and those of you who know what I'm talking about, look it up. The show, it's incredible how you mentioned you allow the audience to be incredibly connected to the people on stage. Have there been any special moments, either one-on-one or where people maybe after the show come up and say, oh, this meant a lot to me because of X, Y, or Z? Or because someone on stage did have a reaction you weren't expecting?
I think there's so many
Lucas Steele, who's so wonderful, plays Anatole. Whenever we're off stage during intermission, I always kind of debrief him on the reaction of people. He has this flirty moment in the top of the show where he'll reach over and he'll maybe scoot the date or the husband to the side and flirt with the wife. And he whispers in their ear, and then they always kind of say something back to him, and then he goes on with the scene. And there was one night where it wasn't a whisper, he did the whisper into her ear, and she just we all could hear her go, wow of wows.
Yeah.
And I think most of them happen with Lucas. He also does this thing where he scoots somebody over and tells them about this Russian custom where everybody has to sit down and be quiet. And he's got his mic right here, and the lady was next to the mic, and she just goes, oh! Yeah. I don't know. I like the Lucas interactions.
Yeah.
They're usually the loudest.
And the character, Lucas is a very handsome man, I must say. But the character he plays is almost this ethereal, David Bowie, come to earth.
Absolutely the image for casting
and so
it, yeah.
he has a very striking presence whenever he's on stage. But so does kind of everybody else in the show.
Somebody on Twitter called him a sex alien.
Sex alien. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
That's pretty much.
Yeah.
So Rachel, I'm glad you mentioned this, and I meant to mention this at the top of the show, that all four of you, in addition to, I think, 19 other cast members and the majority of the creative staff, are making their debuts on Broadway. To have 19 people make their debut in the same show is virtually unheard of. I mean, like when they bring, productions over from the West End, sometimes that happens, but it's pretty unprecedented. So were you and Dave and any of the other sort of the brass behind the show, were you nervous at all, or were you pretty confident?
Yeah, no, I mean, of course we were nervous.
There was one running refrain during rehearsals and during tech, especially where Rachel and the choreographer Sam Pinkleton, they would like be doing something and like trying to problem solve some bit of staging, and then one of them would turn to there and go, "Well, what do they do in real Broadway?"
Yeah, actually, our dance captain, former dance captain Paloma Garcia Lee, she became the go-to because she's done a lot of Broadway shows, and so we would say, "What would they do on real Broadway?" And then very nicely she titled this Extraordinary Broadway. I mean, yes, of course, we were deeply nervous about it. And then also on the flip side, I can't imagine, I mean, again, because we've gotten to grow this so slowly, we started development of this show in 2011. There's no work of art I've ever directed or probably will ever direct that I know as well as I know this show. And I love this show, and I know it's good, and we knew it worked, and that it had all the different elements of high and low and epic and intimate, and was funny and is devastating emotionally. So in a sense, actually, I was very delighted to find out tech is tech, and I've been training for that since I began doing theater when I was in college. So it felt sort of at home, actually, and has been really amazing. I went bowling last night with the Broadway League for the first time, and it's really wonderful to walk into this community and be like, oh, there's this wonderful community here of all these people who are making a living, who are helping to run our city, who are making our city the place that I want to live in, and everyone's a bad bowler.
So we have 2 audience mics, so if you want to line up and ask questions of the cast, we can do that in just a bit. But I have one more question for the group before we open it up. So now it's pretty common, and Josh, you mentioned that you actually did this when you saw the show when it was in the Meatpacking District, is you get a chance to meet a lot of really established people, either in the Broadway community or super fans who also happen to be crazy mega celebrities. So was there anyone that you've met because of the show that made you say, whoa, this is real now? This is sort of my moment of arrival.
Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson
I was going to mention
just, yeah.
Dr. Tyson.
Yeah,
When you have a show about a great comet, and Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson comes
as
by.
As long as he didn't go to Twitter afterwards and say, actually, what the comet would have done. Yeah.
We've had a bunch of people that have come by that, we've really been inspired by. I mean, it's a little bit jarring, especially when they sit on stage, and they're at a table, and Dr. Tyson was just to my left, and I'm singing the first song, and I'm just kind of, all right, well, yeah. That's a whole set of nerves I'm just going to have to handle for the next 2.5 hours. Yeah.
Lucas didn't try to seduce him or anything? Yeah.
No, he was in the wrong seat for that, unfortunately.
Okay, so we can take an audience question.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I've seen the show twice and was blown away both times and completely fell in love with it. And Josh, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. So, so yeah, I really love the show. Touching on the audience participation, has there ever been a time when things have gone really wrong? There's a lot of things to trip on. There's sometimes when maybe the audience doesn't, when you try to participate with them, that they may not react the way you thought that they would, or?
Yeah, I mean, the two, the cell phone incident was certainly a remarkable one in many of our lives, where a cell phone was chucked across the space. It had nothing to do with the show, actually, but was the audience on themselves. I think probably the moment in the show that's most open to, it's there's a little bit of how's this gonna go every night is the passing of the letter to Natasha at the top of Act 2.
That took 5 minutes in my show before the guy realized what he was supposed to do.
Right. So if it takes a very long time, it can step on Lucas's moment, who's singing his guts out. The audience member does have to traverse some stairs, so there have been things that happen there. And then there have been equally wonderful things, one of my favorite moments that people still talk about who were in the tent production is we had a woman, quote unquote, mom dance it over to Natasha, and it was just wonderful. And it was this like whole dance solo that happened in the middle of the tent. So anyway, that's a moment that's certainly open to fail blogs.
Thank you.
But it's nice. It's almost like walking on stage with a grenade and you're about to pull the pin and you're just like, I hope I can get this away from my body in enough time.
Pretty much.
Every night you don't know what you're going to get, which keeps it exciting for sure.
We'll take a question over here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I have a question for Brittain, actually. In your singing style, you bring a very unique, almost folkish style to the voice of Sonia. I was curious how you conceived of that and how that connects to the character.
Well, I was born, and I don't know. I have been singing since I was a kid. I never really had any proper training. And I definitely listened to not even a lot of like folk music. Like I listened to pretty much nothing but oldies when I was a kid. And I loved musical theater when I was in high school. And I definitely never got any parts when I was in high school. I think because I just like didn't understand how musicals worked, and like how I needed to be singing, which is something I really appreciate about. Something I actually really love about being in this show is that I'm not a Broadway singer. But it's just kind of, it's nothing I've intentionally done. I've definitely been asked if it's an affectation. Actually, a celebrity I admire very, very, very much came backstage and was very complimentary, but then asked me, is that your voice? Or is that an affectation? And I was like, no, sir, that's my voice. It's so nice to meet you. But
Dr. Tyson.
Yeah, Dr. Tyson. No, it was not the good doctor. But yeah, I feel fortunate that like I can just sort of be me, and I know Dave, when he wrote Sonia Alone, he wrote it for me, based on my music and my band. So in that sense, I feel really lucky when I just get to like go in there and I get to just like do like that's what I do, and I feel really lucky to be able to do that.
Well, and that's a big thing actually for a lot of the casting of the show is like we don't cast people and then tell them how to sing. We like cast people who sing in amazing ways. So like I had known Brittain's solo work as a singer-songwriter and just loved her voice, and so I very much wrote the role for her voice. Yeah, and that's true of Josh's song as well. Like Josh's big song in Act 1 that was written newly for the Broadway version, Dust and Ashes, was written for Josh's voice because I'm like, oh, Josh has a pretty good voice. Maybe I could write a song for that.
I'm grateful.
Yeah, you should go
all
pro
I can
with
do
that.
is
But yeah, to that point, I mean, it's just, for me, just as a fan and muso first, to be surrounded by such uniqueness, and there is not a single cookie cutter in any way, shape, or form with anybody in the creative cast, backstage and on stage with this show. There is so much nuance. There was so much deep brilliance and uniqueness to every single person that's up there that, it felt very much like home. Like we all are coming from different worlds. If you read all the bios in the playbill, like there are 10 projects that every one of these Broadway cast members have done before they went to Broadway. This is not usually, for many of us, not something that is normal for us. So I think that's one of the things that makes the show so special.
Yeah, and if I can just add on to that, but that goes back to the question about diversity. I mean, it's tragic to me that we're still having a conversation about why it's revolutionary that Oak or Danae should be playing either of the titular roles in a play set in 19th century Russia. But more so, actually, or equally, in the cast is this incredible diversity, as Josh is talking about, of talent and background. It's why there are so many debuts, is because very few of us came up through any sort of pipeline to this moment. And the unpredictability of that is part of the chaos that is in the culture of this show. And I think it's what makes it such a nice place to live in.
I also think that if I had attempted to pursue a musical life, a musical theater life, like starting from college, I would not be the person I am now. I would not be in the show. I think I would have been probably thoroughly disappointed and shut out a long time ago. So, I mean, or, I just kept making rock music in basements and stuff. Be fine.
Cool.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. Dave, this is a question for you. Having played Pierre, but also being the composer, do you feel like you're more self-critical of like either of those aspects of yourself, or is it just like normal separation?
Oh, I'm critical of every aspect. I mean, actually, it was an amazing thing, and you know, Rachel can speak to the frustration of having one of your lead actors also being the composer, because I basically I didn't act until about a week before we opened, because like I'd be trying to act and I'd be like, what is the oboe doing? Like what?
Yeah.
And like it's just very hard for me to switch those parts of my brain. So for me, actually, it was such a gift and a blessing to finally step out of the show. And you know, and yeah, when we first did the show at Ars Nova, we were just 10 of us. There were no understudies. Like it was just us. So we just had to do the show. So I never had the opportunity to step out. And then when we finally transferred off Broadway, we initially had understudies, and then people took over the role. And then I was finally actually able to like step outside of the acting and just watch the writing and just watch the composing. And then I was like, oh yeah, there's some problems. And so which is actually one of the reasons it was so great to be able to come back to the work when we transferred to ART in Boston, and to really expand the role of Pierre, because I think that actually was kind of my blind spot, because I was playing Pierre at first. I didn't recognize that, oh, he really could have a more meaty of a story, and especially in Act 1, and so that was what led to writing the song Dust and Ashes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I should also mention that Dave will be returning to the role of Pierre for a few select dates in May. I am very excited for.
Though we've decided for those performances, instead of Dust and Ashes, I'll just be performing My Ding-a-ling.
Oh, I love My Ding-a-ling. Oh,
It's just a much easier song.
hell of a song.
So, yeah.
Hell of a song.
Yeah, and it fits.
Yeah.
It's the same rooted existential agony in both songs. So it's actually an interesting point, Dave, because now, I mean, especially with, you know, not necessarily that we're in an era after Hamilton, but this idea that you can sort of be a jack of all trades, and you can be the person who wrote it. It was your baby from start to finish, and now you're in the show. Does that intimidate you now that you're on Broadway, to say like, I have to perform now, this is my thing?
No, I mean, I'm so excited. Yeah. I mean, I haven't done it yet either, so who knows? Maybe I'll just collapse, just stay deer in the headlights. No, I'm so excited to go back on and do it. And yeah, and the show does feel like my baby. So to come back, and the role, especially like, again, like Pierre is just like, he's my favorite character in fiction, and like he's the character I relate to the most. So to be able to step back into that role and embody it in this like, you know, beautiful theater with this beautiful cast, like I'm so excited to do it.
And having seen now a couple Pierres having taken the mantle, do you find that you're taking bits of each performance and planning on incorporating it into your own?
Totally. I mean, I think it's happening on a subconscious level for sure. It was so funny when I first stepped out. I would like, you know, and like watch my understudy for the first time. I'd like go to Rachel after performance. Like, you know, I usually put my hand in my pocket there, and I noticed that Luke didn't do that. Could you maybe speak to him about? Yeah. It's pretty important that he puts his hand in his pocket right at that moment. And then Rachel was like, "Okay, Dave." But now I've learned that different actors can have different interpretations.
My pants don't even have pockets, so yeah, the Broadway pants, you'll be horrified to know.
Put that in my
don't have
rider.
pockets.
I demand pockets.
Cool. Yes?
Not so much a question, but a thank you for Rachel. Having grown up in Russia, what you just said, I would never think that I would hear two words in the same sentence. You said Natasha's bat mitzvah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Cool. So now that the show is kind of the same kind of thing of the modern musical, because of how the internet works, it kind of can snowball and take on a life of its own to build a fan base and build this rabid core of people who are obsessed with the show. You know, you've seen now that there's like Tumblrs, several of them dedicated to the show. The fans are, you know, manifesting themselves in a lot of different new ways. So especially for you, Josh, coming from not like a different line of work, but this is their first time on Broadway, and Brittain too. Like, do you find that the fan experience is any different now than it maybe would have been 10, 15 years ago?
In some, I mean, it's been really gratifying to see, and Brittain touched on it a little bit earlier. Just for me personally, my fan base kind of going a little bit out of their comfort zone of what they're used to, and embracing this new adventure and embracing this work. And I'll see sometimes some fans that I'm used to seeing in my concert world coming to 10 shows and wanting to see it from every angle. That means so much to me. And on the flip side of that, people who maybe don't know anything about me from the Broadway community that have also been so supportive and so welcoming. Whenever you can do something artistically that can really blend and educate and give people what they didn't know they wanted, it's such a win-win. And so some things are the same. I still get, you know, dolls
Yeah.
It's pretty consistent, really. I don't know why I get a lot of dolls, but I get dolls of myself. I don't.
Some very
I'm the last
skillfully
person who
made
needs or wants a
dolls.
doll of myself, but and yet there they are at stage door. So
My opening night gift was a doll.
I didn't. He did. He got me a doll.
But I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, it was a nest.
I thought, like,
but
wow, I'm going to really wow everyone. This is like the most creative, unique opening night gift anyone has ever done.
But it wasn't a doll of me, though. It was a traditional nesting doll, wasn't it?
No, I gave you a doll of you.
Of me?
Josh already threw it
It looked
out.
like I don't know. I was like, well, I love it.
I didn't make it.
Yeah, he paid someone else to make it. I don't know.
Worse?
I don't know.
Let's
Okay,
Whoever
change
makes the best
topic.
doll.
Back to the question. I think it's been really exciting to connect to a different type of fan base. The internet has allowed for that to happen. I mean, certainly there's people that are really excited about the show who have never seen the show, who may never see the show, particularly young people. For me, traveling around, I found that like my demographic was of one very narrow strip of people, and it was generally leaned more towards young men aged 21 through 35, and then young women 21 to 35. But now I find that I have this growing fan base of like rabid teenage girls. And for me, I love that. Just because it's like, it feels very rewarding, and it feels really very sweet and genuine to get a letter from a 16-year-old girl who's like, I love your voice. I love your character. I love your song that you sing to Natasha. I love what that means for friendship, for women everywhere. Like, and like for me, that's like way more rewarding than like, hey, what are you drinking? So that is, I don't know. That's very rewarding for me to experience.
Was that the 21 to 35-year-old man you just did?
Yeah, that's like me after the show,
Yeah.
like in whatever town I'm in, that I'm like, oh God, and it's like, hey, I liked your set.
Yeah. The 25-year-old man sounds a lot like the old over it guy also. It's like
Yeah. It's actually the same guy.
yeah. It's Harvey Firestein.
Or the
Yeah.
Simpsons comic book guy.
Yeah.
What is it you were drinking? Yeah, the letters are pretty inspiring, what the show means to people, and especially, like you said, when somebody young who's a student or somebody who's thinking about going into this, and when they write to you that this has opened their eyes of what's possible in theater, it immediately brings you back full circle to those moments when you were inspired and you were that age and you were feeling insecure and lacking vision or a path. And it was art and it was theater that gave you direction. It was arts education that gave you a voice. When you get those letters from people that tell you that this show has been that guide, at least in some small way for them, that's, I think I'm with Brittain on that. That's my favorite part of doing this show.
Cool.
Hi. So coming in as somebody who knew the show was based on War and Peace and not a whole lot else, it was really surprising to me that Andre isn't here. Yeah. And that's sort of the point, and it works really well as like a reflection of Natasha and Pierre, but I'm wondering if there was ever any temptation to cut away to him and show his part in the war.
We're talking.
Part two.
Yeah, Dave and I really want to make like a 150-person site-specific outside version of the Battle of Austerlitz. That would be just that battle. So there is actually this.
Like a Rosencrantz and
Anyone want
Guildenstern
to
version.
make that happen? Yeah. So I think there was this. It was strongly clear right from that very first lyric, and Andre isn't here, that his presence needed to be very restrained and repressed in this piece. But I think also our love for that character is huge, and someday may lead to future work.
Cool. And we'll take one more
I have
question.
another question. So on the topic of your singing tonight, how do you maintain, like in a show that's actually really an opera more than even a musical, your vocal stamina and physical stamina? Because it's also a very physical show. There's a lot of dancing and running around.
Sleep. I mean, truthfully, like it's...
Wait, you sleep?
Very rarely, but when I do, I feel much better on stage. I think that you start to learn... Well, this show's been good for me because it actually pushed where I thought my boundaries had previously been. I'm used to singing 17, 18 songs a night, but I'm also used to taking a day off after every couple of shows. the thought of doing 8 shows a week was frankly terrifying for me, especially with a show that required so much kind of yell singing for me and gravelness to his voice and stuff that I was just, as somebody who's always thought of vocal health consciousness first, was just kind of a worry of mine going into knowing I'd have to do 300 of these. So it's actually taught me a lot that I didn't know I was able to do, which has been really rewarding and educational. But at the same time, you start to learn about the monk mode that you need to kind of go into to recharge. And it's actually pretty fast if you let it be. If you don't burn the candle and you actually get sleep and you try to do good stuff for your brain. I can't be a total monk because then I wind up resenting it. So you have to be social and do stuff, but at the same time, you got to really listen to your body. And I think that this doing Broadway teaches you to be really keen to that.
For me, it's been about recognizing my boundaries before I hit them, which is something I was never very good about before or never really had to think about, because when you're doing your own stuff also is that you can have a moment where you're like, oh, I can't sing this one song because I just I maybe yelled too much a little last night, or you don't have to, it's your decision to not. But in a show where you have to do the show, there's no way around that. You know that you can't scream the night before. So for me, it's just been, in addition to what Josh said, getting rest and making sure you're taking care of your health, it's like knowing your boundaries before you hit them. And for me, that's been really useful when I'm like, you know what, I really want to go out tonight, but I can't. Or like, man, another whiskey sounds great, but smart person brain says maybe not tonight. So I think that's been critical.
And the other great thing about having a cast to lean on is that you get a chance to, as you're singing through the show, kind of clock where you're at each night. And so every night feels different. I come out and I sing the first few lines of my very, very first song, and I just go, okay, well, that's where I'm at today. And I know exactly where I need to put my voice or put my energy level in order to get to song 7 and do that successfully. So you start to learn a little bit about energy management, vocal management, in no way, shape, or form that affects what you're giving to the audience each and every night. That's always consistent. But internally, you learn a lot about, like you said, you can't change anything. The domino effect starts the moment those double doors open. So you learn about that, which has been very helpful too.
Thank you.
Thanks. So one last question. I feel like a wonderful spine that's been involved, that's kind of woven its way through this whole conversation, is that everyone here is kind of doing this for the first time. And when there is maybe a second time, what is the number one lesson that you've learned from doing this?
Are we supposed to learn things?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm thinking. I was told there wouldn't be a quiz. I don't know. I think that the bar for me has been so raised, and I've been so lucky as a first going out that there has been such a specialness. Everything that we've mentioned in the last hour about what makes this cast unique, this story unique, this show unique, that's a huge creative bar for me that I'm so fortunate and humbled to have started with on Broadway, which is a very unusual thing to have started with. We all, I think, feel lucky in that same way. So I think for me, whatever next adventure, I would make sure that I hold to the same standard of doing something that maybe is less expected, that is an educational experience, maybe not so down the middle, and surround myself with creative people that I know I'm going to learn a great deal from. And I think that if it doesn't, the next going out doesn't continue to meet those criteria, then I would feel like the bar was lowered a little bit. But it has to be challenging to me in those ways, I think, going forward.
Yeah, it's funny. I think actually there have been many lessons in terms of just like literally just this is what a tech process looks like, and this is when they need your set designs and all of that. But I think like spiritually, maybe one of the biggest things really does come from Howard Kagan, who's our producer, who I think, and I say this as a female leader, I think my default and I don't know that this is tied to my femaleness or not, but is to take care and to know what is being feared and try to ameliorate that. Did I use that word right? Address that fear before we get there and make things achievable and potentially debase or lower an idea a little bit. And right from the start, Howard was very encouraging of being uncompromising in what we had achieved at Ars Nova, scenically, spiritually, the levels of that show, and saying we could do that on first in the tent and then on Broadway, and that we didn't have to sacrifice. And there were, of course, painful choices and ideas that were killed in that process, but actually the encouragement, beginning to think about how this show tours, and him relentlessly saying, don't start with reality. Actually, start with what would the ideal be of what this show looks like on the road when you have, a day or a couple days to go into a space versus the 4-week load-in process that we had for transforming a Broadway house. And that's been very bolstering, and it's something I'll take forward.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. Just a quick some plugs. You can get tickets to Natasha, Pierre the Great Comet of 1812 on telecharge.com. Josh, when are you wrapping up your stint?
I'm a little over the halfway point, so I'm going to be done July 2nd.
July 2nd. Yep. And Dave, do you know you'll be doing a couple specific dates that are listed on the?
I believe my first date is May 4th.
4th.
Oh yeah, because it's Star Wars Day.
It is, yeah.
Which is like, oh, I'm so excited about
You can't call out your first day, you know that?
Yeah.
What's that?
You can't call out your first day.
But
I can
call out to Star Wars on the first day.
Yeah.
The beginning.
It is your show, so no one's going to correct you. Well, Rachel, you probably would correct him.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you all. Can I get a round of applause for our 4 guests? Thank you.